It was going to be a huge success. Those were the words, the absolute certainty of Gal Gadot regarding her starring role as the evil queen in Disney's live-action epic Snow White. She was sure of it. The budget was colossal, the brand was iconic, and her star power was undeniable. But that magical, happily ever after success story never materialized. Instead, the film, long before its release, became mired in controversy and was ultimately labeled by interviewers, to Gadot's face, as a huge flop. So what poisoned the apple for this would-be blockbuster? According to the evil queen herself, the answer isn't a flawed script, questionable marketing, or a misreading of the audience. The culprit, she claims, is a dark and growing pressure within the gilded cages of Hollywood, a pervasive pressure to speak out against her home country, Israel. Today, we are pulling back the velvet rope on this explosive accusation. Was one of the most beloved fairy tales of all time deliberately sabotaged by a raging political firestorm? Or is this a convenient narrative to cover up a deeply troubled production? We'll dissect Gal Gadot's shocking interview, explore the whirlwind of controversy that engulfed her co-star, the new Snow White, Rachel Zegler, and investigate whether the intractable politics of the Middle East have now officially become a box office curse in Hollywood. This is a story of fairy tales, modern political warfare, and a career-defining performance caught in the brutal crossfire of a world that has no time for make-believe. But before we delve into the accusations, let's remember what was at stake here. This wasn't some small, independent project. This was a Disney live-action remake, the crown jewel of their modern cinematic strategy. These films are less like movies and more like global cultural events, billion-dollar juggernauts designed to print money and reinforce brand loyalty across generations. The pressure to deliver a universally beloved four-quadrant hit was immense, not just for the studio's bottom line, but for the legacy of one of its most foundational characters. For a film of this magnitude to be labeled a flop is a corporate cataclysm, and finding a reason, a single, potent narrative for that failure, becomes paramount for everyone involved. Let's set the stage for Gadot's bombshell revelation, because the context is almost as revealing as the statement itself. This wasn't a typical high-pressure press junket with seasoned, cynical journalists in a sterile Los Angeles hotel room. The interview took place in Israel, her homeland, creating a more intimate and perhaps more candid atmosphere. And the people asking the questions were amateur journalists, all on the autism spectrum. A unique setting that may have encouraged a level of raw honesty we rarely get to see from A-list celebrities shielded by layers of public relations experts. It was in this environment that Gadot, when confronted with the film's perceived failure, didn't offer the usual corporate-approved excuses. She didn't blame a competitive summer schedule or audience fatigue with remakes. Instead, she pointed a finger directly at a specific date and the seismic geopolitical shift that followed, October 7th, 2023. She explained, and you can almost hear the deep-seated frustration in her voice, that in the wake of those horrific events, what's happening in all kinds of industries and also in Hollywood is that there's a lot of pressure on celebrities to bring up things against Israel. Take a moment to truly absorb the weight of that statement. She is alleging that there exists an unspoken yet powerful mandate in the entertainment capital of the world. What does this pressure actually look like? It's likely not a smoky backroom where studio heads dictate political stances. It's something more insidious, more pervasive. It's the roar of social media, where a single problematic statement can spawn trending hashtags demanding an actor be canceled or recast. It's the fear in a casting director's office that hiring someone with the wrong politics will invite boycotts and a public relations nightmare. It's the chilling effect that causes artists to self-censor, to stay silent on issues they care about for fear of derailing a $100 million production and being labeled difficult or toxic to work with. Gadot is suggesting that this unspoken system has now firmly turned its sights on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, creating an environment where one side is amplified and the other is effectively silenced. This isn't just an actress making an excuse for a struggling film. It's a damning indictment of her entire industry's climate. She expressed a profound sense of disappointment, not just as a professional whose work was impacted, but as an Israeli citizen trying to provide a different perspective to a global audience. You can always explain and try to give people in the world a context about what's happening in Israel and what the reality is here, but in the end, people decide for themselves, she lamented, a statement heavy with the exhaustion of someone fighting a losing battle for hearts and minds. The result, in her eyes, was clear, direct, and devastating. I was disappointed that the movie was greatly affected by that and didn't do well at the box office. The line was drawn. The battle was no longer a fairy tale conflict between Snow White and the evil queen. It was a real-world battle of narratives, ideologies, and public perception. And according to Gal Gadot, her film was one of its most high-profile casualties. But this fire didn't just spontaneously erupt on October 7th. To understand the full scope of this story, we have to talk about Snow White herself, the young and talented actress Rachel Zegler. Long before Gadot's interview, Zegler was at the epicenter of her own social media storm. While promoting the film's first trailer and thanking her millions of fans for their enthusiastic support on the platform X, formerly known as Twitter, she appended her message with a short but incredibly potent phrase, "And always remember, Free Palestine." Those 5 words, in the context of the ongoing conflict, were like throwing a lit match into a tanker of gasoline. The digital backlash was instantaneous and ferocious, cleaving the internet in two. On one side, she was hailed as a hero of her generation, an artist unafraid to speak truth to power. On the other, she was condemned as naive at best and a hypocrite at worst for collecting a massive Disney paycheck while simultaneously attacking the very system of apolitical, family-friendly entertainment that the brand was built on. The discourse became a proxy war, with every like, retweet, and comment section serving as a digital battlefield for the larger real-world conflict. This brings us to the core of the onset paradox, a dynamic more fascinating than any scripted drama. Gal Gadot is not just an Israeli actress. She is a former soldier in the Israeli Defense Forces, having served her mandatory 2 years from 2004 to 2009. Her connection to the Israeli state and its military is deep, personal, and a core part of her public identity. So you have a former IDF soldier playing the evil queen and a vocal pro-Palestinian advocate playing Snow White. It sounds like the setup for a high-stakes political thriller, not a children's movie. This clash of worlds is absolutely fascinating, a microcosm of the global conflict playing out on a Disney soundstage. If you're finding this deep dive into the hidden politics of Hollywood compelling, do us a favor and hit that like button to let us know. What's truly remarkable, and adds another layer of complexity, is Gadot's own account of their working relationship. When asked directly about Zegler, she didn't hint at any on-set tension or ideological conflict. Her response was surprisingly warm. She described their time together as fun and fondly recalled that the pair shared a great deal of laughter. This presents a truly complex and intriguing picture. Was this a case of 2 consummate professionals setting aside their deeply held, diametrically opposed beliefs for the sake of the art and the production? Or was the on-set harmony a fragile illusion, a professional facade destined to be shattered the moment the camera stopped rolling and the harsh realities of the real world intervened? The contrast between Gadot's memory of laughter on set and the ensuing public relations nightmare is stark, highlighting the immense and perhaps unbridgeable chasm between private collaboration and public perception in our hyper-politicized era. However, for the sake of a balanced perspective, it's absolutely crucial to ask the tough question. Is Gal Gadot's explanation the full story? Or is she, perhaps, focusing on one convenient and emotionally charged narrative to distract from the myriad of other problems that plagued the Snow White production from its very inception? Let's be fair. This movie was courting controversy and fan backlash long before the tragic events of October 7th. There was significant and sustained criticism leveled at early comments made by Rachel Zegler herself, where she seemed to openly disparage the original 1937 animated classic that she was tasked with bringing to life. In multiple interviews, she spoke of the original prince's actions as stalkerish and declared that her modern Snow White wouldn't be saved by a prince, nor would she be dreaming about true love. Instead, this new princess would be a powerful leader, dreaming of the throne she could one day inherit. These comments were replayed endlessly by conservative media and YouTube commentators, painting a picture of a young star who seemed to hold contempt for the very role that was meant to catapult her to global superstardom. It created a narrative that the film was being made by people who didn't respect or even like the source material. While many praised this progressive, modern take, a very vocal and powerful segment of Disney's fanbase felt it was deeply disrespectful to Walt Disney's original vision and symptomatic of a so-called woke agenda they believe is hurting the brand. Then, of course, there was the infamous Seven Dwarfs controversy. After esteemed actor Peter Dinklage, who has a form of dwarfism, publicly criticized the original story for its backwards and stereotypical portrayal of dwarfs, Disney swiftly announced they would be reimagining the characters. They would be replaced with magical creatures of various sizes, ethnicities, and genders to avoid reinforcing stereotypes. Leaked photos from the set seem to confirm this radical departure, sparking another massive wave of outrage from audiences who felt the studio was sacrificing a classic, beloved story at the altar of political correctness. So, when the film ultimately struggled to gain traction, was it primarily because of the complex politics of the Middle East, as Gadot powerfully suggests? Or was it because the production had already managed to alienate a significant portion of its core audience through a series of what many saw as entirely unforced errors and misjudgments about what fans wanted from a Snow White remake? It is entirely possible that the political controversy Gadot highlights was not the root cause, but simply the final, devastating straw that broke the camel's back. A potent accelerant poured onto a fire that was already burning dangerously out of control. Critics of Gadot's theory would argue that blaming the film's failure solely on anti-Israel sentiment in Hollywood is a strategic deflection from these other, very real and very public production issues. The impact wasn't just felt in American multiplexes or on social media feeds. The controversy had tangible, official, global consequences that underscore the severity of the situation. In a direct reflection of the political divide, the movie was outright banned in the nation of Lebanon, a country with a long and violent history of conflict with Israel. This wasn't a case of audiences simply choosing not to buy a ticket. This was a sovereign government stepping in to actively censor the film, an action almost certainly taken due to the prominent role of a former IDF soldier. This official act lends significant credence to Gadot's claim that the film's artistic identity became hopelessly and inseparably entangled with the real-world conflict. It demonstrates that, at least in some parts of the world, art cannot and will not be separated from the politics of its creators. So, where does this leave us? We have a film, once confidently destined for greatness in the eyes of its star, now remembered as a huge flop before it even hits most theaters. We have a world-famous actress, Gal Gadot, who genuinely believes her work was sabotaged by a hostile political climate in her own industry. We have another rising star, Rachel Zegler, whose personal political activism may have inadvertently contributed to the firestorm. And we have a studio, Disney, caught in the treacherous middle of a cultural and political minefield of its own making. The troubled story of Snow White has tragically become a cautionary tale for modern Hollywood. It proves that in our hyper-connected, politically polarized world, no story is safe, not even a simple fairy tale. The lines between on-screen fantasy and off-screen reality have blurred to the point of being indistinguishable. We leave you with the ultimate question. Was Gal Gadot right? Was this a targeted takedown fueled by insidious industry pressure? Or was Snow White a deeply troubled production that simply failed to connect with its audience, with the political angle now serving as a convenient scapegoat? The debate is far from over, and it touches on some of the biggest questions facing the future of entertainment. To make sure you don't miss our next investigation into the hidden stories behind the blockbusters, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. The truth, much like the poisoned apple, often has a hidden, bitter core. And very bitter core.